Here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Yeah, this for my dogs from the east to the west side. You rockin' brown and orange with me, baby. Let's ride. Represent the land, let them know. Tell them, here we go, Brownies. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Here We Go Brownies podcast. I am Allie Heisong, coming at you live from Sneads Ferry, North Carolina. Joined with me, as always, out in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, we've got Dustin. Dustin, what's going on?
Not much. I am waiting for the day you mess that up. It's going to happen. You know
it's bound to happen. I'm going to say it. It's just, I've been saying it for years. Beautiful Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, I know you have a full-time job. That's what we do. You know, this is our semi-full-time job. And so
this is full-time job number 2.
Yeah, you're right. It is. But yes, we are live from the Barley House, guys. If you are in the Cleveland area, stop on down here. Our wonderful sponsors, Stadium Mustard, one of our great sponsors, Stadium Mustard, is giving away some bottles of Stadium Mustard. So if you haven't got that in your fridge and you're hanging out in Cleveland, and by the way, one lucky person will get that Joe Thomas autographed item tonight. Stop by, come by, say hello, have a drink, say hello to the great folks here at the Barley House. They have a new kitchen manager, and I hear the food is even better than it was before. That excited me. Allie, I think, do you like wraps, Allie? You like the wraps? Like, you know,
yeah.
like the chicken wraps? I had that with a salad. Delish. It was great. So I'm trying to eat better, Allie, because I got to get that, you know, got a trip coming up. Got to look good, feel good. We're going on a cruise, so watching what I eat. Don't want to be the fatty on the trip. But anyway, take it away.
Well, I was just going to say that you pointed out the Stadium Mustard. So we got to talk about our friends over at Stadium Mustard. Guys, if you don't have Stadium Mustard in your kitchen this season, you're doing it wrong. The iconic brand, the iconic taste. It is beloved from ballparks to backyards and everywhere in between. Stadium Mustard is a smooth brown mustard rich in both taste and tradition, and it's loved by millions. So be sure to head on over to stadiummustard.com to shop now. While we're at it, Dustin, you mentioned a trip we've got coming up. That's right. We are headed to the Caribbean. So here's a quick word from our friends over at Seaside Events.
Hey there, Browns fans, pack your bags for the ultimate dog pound at sea party on the amazing Independence of the Seas in March of 2024 as we embark on a 5-day all-inclusive Caribbean cruise. Spend time with your favorite Browns alumni like Josh Cribbs, Eric Metcalf, Webster Slaughter, and many more. Presented by Seaside Events. Cabins are selling fast, so book yours now. Visit BrownsFanCruise.com or call 216-284-6472 today.
So, Dustin, last we spoke, we were talking about the Ken Dorsey hire as the offensive coordinator. And we kind of thought that was maybe the end of it for some big news as it pertains to the Cleveland Browns coaching staff hires. Obviously, we knew maybe a couple shifts here and there. But since we last spoke, Bill Callahan has left the Cleveland Browns to go to Tennessee to be with his son, Brian Callahan. So really a bittersweet situation, you know, for him. But a once in a lifetime opportunity to go work for your son. I mean, like, my dad isn't a coach in the National Football League, but man, I'll tell you what, I would have a great time being able to like hire my dad at my job and like boss him around a little bit throughout the day. Like, that'd be a lot of fun.
I thought that was really funny where Bill, you know, Stefanski goes, I just can't wait for the moment that Bill gets excited about bossing his dad around. Like, what kid doesn't want to be like, no, Dad, actually, I'm the boss and you will listen to me. But it also is a unique experience that, you know, a lot of coaches don't get. To be able to have that father-son relationship. A good friend of the program, you know, Greg Williams, and, you know, his son got to do that with the Browns, right? And he talked about how unique that was when Greg became the interim coach and that Blake was made the defensive coordinator for that season. And he said it was a really cool, unique experience to be there with your dad and have a really tight-knit group and do something like that. So, they, you know, those kind of things don't present themselves very often. So it's kind of cool.
No. And look, it is, it really sucks as Browns fans and probably within the organization to lose one of the best to ever do it. Bill Callahan is, you know, in that conversation of the best, one of, if not the best offensive line coaches, you know, in the history of the league. He is that good. So does it suck to lose him? Well, yeah, of course. But I think we can collectively be happy for him for this really unique opportunity to go coach with his son. But look, you know, this is not the same situation as the Alex Van Pelt they basically fired him. He can go, seek other opportunities. Bill really had to kind of consider his options here and what he wanted to do.
Sure.
I'm sure he will be welcome back within the organization at any point if that opportunity were
For
to
some
arise.
kind of consulting or anything,
Yeah,
right? Exactly.
of course, of course. So definitely, no burned bridges there from what it looks like. But with that, somebody's knocking on the door. With that, Andy Dickerson is hired as your new offensive line coach coming from Seattle. So, Dustin, I want to turn it over to you. Your initial thoughts on this. Do you think obviously some really big shoes to fill, but are you feeling good about this hire?
Well, here's the thing. We talked about this on the last show. And guys, if you get a chance, speaking of Ken Dorsey, it was fun to debate with Hanford Dixon because he was on two sides of this. I liked the hire. He didn't like the hire as much. We talk about these assistant coaches. Sometimes, not that they get stale or whatever, there's just a lot of movement on that, in that space. Like,
Yeah.
if you're an assistant coach in the National Football League, don't buy, rent, right? Like that's kind of the MO just because of the industry. But I'm a West Coast guy. I got to see a lot of Seahawks. From what I hear, this guy's high energy. He's really good at getting his players to play at a high level. And last time I checked, the Seattle Seahawks had a really good offensive line, right? So at the end of the day, I think it is a good hire. I think the Browns were methodical about how they want to approach this and look for the guy, but I think he's a good hire. I think he's going to bring in some young youthfulness, and not that Bill Callahan was like, just because you're older, you can't be a great coach, but
Sure.
bringing in a younger guy that can, maybe relate to some of these younger guys, right? Like the Dow, some of these guys that are younger coming up that are, closer in age. I like the hire. Honestly, I looked at it and I
Mhm.
looked at his past and I like the hire. What's your opinion on this hire, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're getting some fresh perspective, and take a look at what Seattle did, especially their offensive line. It was pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to sit here on the podcast tonight and act like I know everything about Andy Dickerson's past, because certainly
Sure.
I don't. But I mean, you can get on here and look. I mean, if we go through this, and you'll recognize his name because he spent time in Cleveland, so that's why he may sound familiar to you. So he's been with the Redskins, Redskins at the time back in 2003, then went to New England, kind of got his career kickstarted there, as you can imagine, in the early 2000s. Then went to the Jets. He was a coaching assistant / defensive quality control coach. Then came to Cleveland as your defensive quality control coach / assistant offensive line coach in 2010. So, you like that experience. And then was with the Jets again, went to the Rams from 2012 to 2020 in their kind of heyday, assistant offensive line coach there. Went to Seattle up until recently. He was the run game coordinator and offensive lines coach, and now here in Cleveland. So pretty good resume. Like I said, I can't sit here and act like I know everything about the guy. I certainly don't. But what we know of him, it really fits with what this Browns team is looking to do philosophically on offense.
Yeah, and let's just call it for what it is. You said he got his start in the early 2000s with the New England
Yeah.
Patriots. Bill Belichick isn't going to hire a bum. Okay, so he obviously saw the worth in him. And last time I checked, Tom Brady played really well in the early 2000s and did quite well with his offensive line. So yeah, this guy's been through the league. He's been on some really good teams, and I think maybe it was his time to. We all know what happened with the Pete Carroll and the whole coaching staff there. So he had to find another job, right? That was going to be the deal, right? He had to find a landing place, and he did. And I think it's going to be a good move for Cleveland. Like you said, sometimes new blood isn't bad blood. It's a different look and perspective on that offensive line, and maybe he can relate to some of these younger players.
You know how this is a live show, Dustin. Well, every single week, I do what I can in my office here, my office setup, to make sure that it is dog
To keep
proof
out
and
the
it's
zoo,
cat
keep
proof.
out the zoo.
Yeah, I keep the dogs out and I keep the cat out. And I thought I kicked the cat out. Turns out he's actually in here with me still. Here he is. So let me kick him out real quick. But Dustin, while I'm kicking the cat out, why don't you tell our listeners about Barley House and what you got going on there?
Yeah, so Barley House, guys, if any of you are in the Cleveland area tonight, come on, swing down. Like I said, we've got Stadium Mustard here. We have a cool thing signed by Joe Thomas when he was here for his event for that Thursday night game back when the Browns clinched the playoff game. But just come down here. Like I said, the food is really good. It's right down here on West 6, right in Cleveland. And if you're familiar with the area, this is where they do the huge tailgate pregame where thousands of people come down here and tailgate and be merry before each Browns home game.
And they be merry. Yeah, I thought I didn't have him in here. Like, I always check right before we go on, just because, what he does during the day is I have my keyboard here, my keyboard. He will get up on the desk and walk on it. And I cannot tell you the number of emails that he sent before. So, not a great office assistant when you're podcasting. But nonetheless, he's fun to have around. All right, we are going to go out on the line here for the medical minute. And this is brought to you by our friends over at Lorello Vineyards.
Everybody, my name's Kim Lorello, and my husband and I, Larry, started Lorello Vineyards over 21 years ago. We're a small cantina nestled in the Grand River Valley in Geneva, Ohio. Our winery consists of 2 beautiful tasting rooms, and we have 2 rooms that can transform into party rooms inside. Our menu here at Lorello's is home cooking. We have wood-fired Tuscan pizzas, paninis, salads, and several appetizers. We have award-winning wines that have won medals internationally, nationally, and locally. In the summer and springtime, we have a beautiful outdoor patio that also we have live entertainment. We also have entertainment sporadically through the entire year inside during our cool fall and winter months. Additionally, outside in the summer, we have a beautiful tent that can house several guests for a private function. We hope to see you soon, and if you want any more information on Lorello Vineyards, you can go to our website at www.lorellovineyards.com. We hope to see you soon.
All right, and with that, let's go out on the medical minute with Dr. David Ullery. David, what is going on?
Hello, Allie and Dustin. Good evening.
David, good to see you.
Good to see you. We just
ya.
had dinner. We just had dinner together in the kitchen. We had tacos. It was great.
Are you eating healthy though? That's the question.
You know what? We are. We are all in.
Yesterday.
Seriously though, we've really stepped it up since we got back from like all of our travel. It is go time. Not only, Dustin, do we have this cruise upcoming, but planning the wedding. We are on it. All right, David, let's get into it tonight. Obviously, guys, we don't have a ton of injury updates, and ultimately that's a good thing. So what we're going to do over the course of the next few weeks is just have David kind of dive into a specific topic or study or something. So tonight we're going to talk all about ACLs and the injuries and how common they are in the NFL and maybe why they are so common. So David, it's all you. Let's hear about ACLs.
Let's get into it. So I think it's a pretty hot topic as always in the NFL, especially for Browns fans this season. And so I think, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but to go into some more detail, just for a little, anatomy and education is never a bad thing. So overall, beginning kind of big picture, what is an ACL? It's the anterior cruciate ligament, cruciate meaning cross. And so there's 2 of them in the knee. They're in the middle of the knee. There's the anterior and the posterior, and they kind of make a cross in the middle of the knee. That's why they're called cruciate. It's the main stabilizing ligament of the knee and accounts for upwards of 80% of the resistance it provides stability from the tibia moving anterior or forward relative to the femur. And it's about 80 to 9% of that stability within the knee joint. Overall, there's about 400,000 ACL reconstructions done per year in the United States, and that accounts for half of all knee injuries. And so it's not a small number. It's not insignificant, and it's a large population or a large amount of the surgeries that I do on a regular basis. I probably do 2 to 3 a month in the Navy here. And so it's a very common injury. We see it a lot. There's a lot of times combined injuries with it too. Including meniscal injuries such as medial meniscus or other ligamentous injuries too. And one thing we do know is that almost everybody who has an ACL tear 10 years after the injury, even having surgery, develops some amount of arthritis in the knee. And so even with the perfect surgery, reconstructing it right away, arthritis does set in because it's such a significant injury and impact to the knee. And so when it comes to reconstructing it, we have a couple different options. We kind of break it down into using your own tissue or using tissue from a donor, aka a cadaver or a dead person. majority of people who have an ACL tear are young in their 20s or even younger. And so we opt for using their own tissue. It's just better quality. It's got less risk of infection or some sort of rejection by the body, and there's good options. And so typically the options include using part of the quadriceps tendon from the top of the knee, using a part of the patellar tendon, so that the ligament that connects the patella or kneecap to the tibia, and you take some bone with that one, or using your hamstring tendons. And so all three are viable options. I'd say in the NFL, the most commonly used is probably the patellar tendon because you get some bone as well. And the way you fix it is by drilling tunnels in the tibia and the femur bones and putting those little plugs of bone into them, holding them in place, and then the body incorporates it as a new ACL.
Just a question on that, because that sounds so much to me. Like that sounds like such a big deal. And it's just so funny because like
just
you
drill,
say,
just drill a hole.
just drill a couple holes in the bone, like you're fine. So, if you go back to let's just say 8 to 10 years ago in the NFL, David, and there's an ACL, like that's such a catastrophic injury to have. It was such an ordeal. The recovery time took forever. Can you just talk about kind of what's changed in the technology and like why and how guys can get back bigger, better, faster, stronger now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is we have developed protocols that enable a quicker return on some levels. At the end of the day, the body heals tissue as the body heals it. There's not a great way to speed up that process. And so the front end of recovery has remained pretty much the same, just because there's only so much we can do while the body heals it. You don't want to stress it too early and risk re-tearing it or that healing process to not work. But sort of on that back end, we've learned there's certain exercises we can do, certain training programs and regimens we can do that are safe to do and reliable and help an athlete get back to form quicker, because there's certain activities and exercises you can do right away after having your ACL reconstructed that don't put stress on the ACL. And so if you do those things and focus on strengthening those specific muscles or those specific exercises, you're kind of ahead when it comes to doing the rest of it then. And so I think a lot of it has been just, continuously studying our rehab techniques and our rehab approach to it. And then also just, increased resources in general and a better knowledge about how the body works and the body heals. Certainly the graft choices are pretty much the same as they were a decade ago, 2 decades ago, even 3 decades ago. So I think it's really what happens after surgery that has kind of helped athletes get back and get better results. And so kind of going off of that and going more towards the NFL side of things and the approach to it. One other thing, actually, which is an interesting thing, the way an ACL is kind of developed or grows in a person. And so the way that we know the size of someone's ACL is not based on their weight or based on their mass. It's based on the size of their tibia, the proximal part of their tibia and the knee joint. And so if you have a person who's 6 foot tall and weighs 150 and a person who's 6 foot tall and weighs 300 pounds, their ACLs are the same. And so you can imagine how when you have linemen, linebackers, these large players who have so much mass, but their ACLs are the same as someone who might weigh half of their weight. And so I think that's part of the reason why we see ACL injuries in high impact and high energy athletes, is just because even though they have increased muscle mass and increased strength and size, their ACL doesn't change in size or diameter or strength at all. And so that's where prevention of an ACL injury kind of comes into play. And you start discussing, like, do you ramp up to the season? You don't start intensely right away. Are there specific nutrition and diet protocols that can kind of help with ligamentous health and other things like that? And so it's something interesting to keep in mind when it comes to considering athletes tearing their ACLs. Another thing with ACLs, looking at NFL players, there's a study, and I think we talked about it last time, but there's a study in 2022 in the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine that looked at 312 NFL players over I think 10 season period that had ACL tears, and there was only 174 of them that returned to play. That's 55%. And so even though we have all this great technology, in the NFL, the return to play rate is 55%. And of those players eligible to return, only 28% were still in the league 3 years after their injury. So you tear your ACL in the NFL, after 3 years, there's less than 1/3 chance that you're going to still be playing.
Okay, so
it's not insignificant. Yeah.
I want to double down on that because Larry brought up a comment. We brought this up in the previous show. So, like, Nick Chubb is clearly a special human being. He, had that tear at Georgia. That's why he dropped to the second round for the Browns, and they scooped him up. And then he went on for several years without having another injury, more than 3, right? And then he had this dramatic thing happen to him in the Pittsburgh game. So to your point, you're almost superhuman, right? In some ways, if you're able to come back from something like that. So walk us through that. Larry mentioned here in the comments, what does that look like? I think you said in an ideal world, week 4, right? Maybe 4 weeks into the season would be an ideal situation, not probably the beginning of the season, but kind of just walk us back through that, because literally, I mean, Nick Chubb's a superhuman. I mean, if we're talking about that, he's in that 20 to 30% area, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. And I think this is only just they don't specify, but this is likely just looking at a primary ACL, meaning their first time injuring it. So again, even more so, this is his second time injuring it, and so that could even contribute more of that. So I mean, if you look at it from purely a number standpoint, numbers alone, and just considering just a first time injury, he only has a 50% chance of actually returning to play and 28% chance of having a meaningful long-term recovery. And I would venture to say that it's even less than that because it's a second time going through it. And so you're absolutely right, Dustin. I mean, in that sense, when you consider the fact that, I don't know his stats, or not his stats, but like his height and weight. But I mean, he's probably a little bit heavier than the average person for his height, and it's because of all of his muscle mass. And so considering that as well, I mean, both of his ACLs go through a lot of stress just through training and through playing a football game. And so, I can't say whether or not if he'll be back, but I still do think, like we talked about earlier, it's likely it would be around, month 2, early on in the second month of the season. And he's done it once before, so he probably has a propensity for being able to recover, having the right mindset and approach to it. And so there's a good chance that he'll do it again. I think compared to another athlete, but it still is, it's not guaranteed. And I try to remain optimistic, both just as a fan of football and sports in general, but especially for Browns fans. But you have to be honest about it too, and just recognize that there's a 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 5 chance that he does not play meaningful snaps again. And he just, it's hard, especially as like a GM or an owner, to take that into consideration and plan for the future. I mean, what do you do in that situation when you have your star, like who could be an all-time running back, who is, now undergoing a second ACL reconstruction, and how do you plan for that? And at the end of the day, you have to believe in your rehab team and the surgeon and the physicians and the physical therapists, but you also kind of have to hedge your bets and know that there is a chance like this that he's not going to return, and you need someone to be able to step up in his place. And so just like for an example of athletes who have had ACL injuries and returned, especially in the NFL, I just found this quick little article about 5 athletes. As we all know, Tom Brady had his ACL injury and came back and won multiple Super Bowls. Same with Rob Gronkowski, who had an ACL and an MCL. J.J. Watt, Teddy Bridgewater, but one that was pretty significant in my mind was Adrian Peterson. In 2011, on Christmas Eve, he tore his ACL and MCL, very similar to Nick Chubb. And he made it back that following season. So this was Christmas Eve. This was later than when Nick Chubb tore his ACL. And that very next season, he came back after injury with a 2,097-yard season and almost broke the NFL rushing record. And so, again, you talk about superhuman. He is definitely one of them, but I think Nick Chubb is in that tier of athletes who have a similar remarkable recovery.
Yeah. I mean, so a couple things there. One, you see the off-season videos prior to the injury of Nick Chubb squatting literally all of the weight in the world, the literal weight of the world that he is just squatting. Also, totally off topic, but it's really funny to me that I kick the cat out of the office and he goes straight to the kitchen and bugs David. That's classic. But second of all, is just going back to Nick Chubb, and as Browns fans, as football fans, we all have to kind of brace for that potential reality that Nick Chubb does not come back, 1, at all and play meaningful snaps, or 2, not the same Nick Chubb, or 3, he comes back better than ever.
Right.
I think that any of that is a possibility. And another thing to keep in mind is the contract situation of Nick Chubb and how difficult that will be. If that is the case, that he is just not the same player, that will have to be a real thing. So obviously we don't want that. I don't even want to put that out there. But it is something to kind of keep in your back pocket. But David, I want to ask you while we're on Nick Chubb. I've heard just around the league, I've heard when people are talking about Nick Chubb and his injury, they say, this was the worst or the most gruesome ACL tear that I have ever seen. And I just want to ask you, it was gruesome to the naked eye, completely. It was disgusting. I hated it. I got queasy. But to you, do you think that's the case? Does kind of the gruesome nature of an injury relate to the severity? Or is it just, man, that looked really bad?
No, I do think that there is some merit in that, but I think you have to kind of qualify that statement, just because while it was a gruesome injury, it wasn't just an ACL. If we want to look at what just an ACL injury looks like, we've all seen it. You've kind of seen that the individual plants their foot and you see this shift, and like the knee kind of pops back and like pops out and pops back in, and it's got that forward shift and lean, and you know right away that that was an ACL. Chubb's injury was a little more advanced, and certainly the appearance of it will make you, or can make you, recognize that it's more severe, but it was because he also tore his MCL too. And so not only was the tibia shifting forward, but it was also bending to the side way more than it should. And so it gave that appearance of it just completely going in the wrong direction. And so that certainly indicates a more significant injury, but it also just wasn't an ACL. There was multiple ligaments that were injured. And so, of course, naturally, if you tear more than one thing, it's a little bit higher energy or more severe injury. And so it definitely looked more gruesome, and it was, just because multiple things were torn. And so it's not necessarily a wrong way to phrase it or state it, but it's also not just an ACL.
Yeah.
Let me ask you real quick about that, David. So to your point is, if you have just like any weakness on your body, like you had an ACL, you're more prone to have another, if you stress that piece of your body again, to more significant than the other knee, for instance, or whatever. You have a higher chance of re-injuring that area because of it's not as strong as an original, bone that's up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as much as we like to say that we can put people back together, I mean, nobody can make us the way God made us. And so I like to say I try to get you back to where you were before the injury, but I can never get you to 100%. And I don't guarantee anything for my patients. And I think any doctor who's honest and realistic can't. You just can't guarantee that. There's so many variables that go into reconstructing an ACL and doing a knee surgery that it's not fair to try and make any sort of guarantee like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're absolutely at increased risk for re-tearing an injured side compared to a non-injured side. One other thing I want to look at just when it comes to ACL tears in the NFL, I found this article actually from Mile High Report on SB Nation for the Denver Broncos, and it's talking about why the Denver Broncos have so many more ACL injuries than every other team. Not a good explanation, but I thought the numbers were very interesting. So from 2013 until 2020, looking at all teams across the NFL, the Denver Broncos have had 26 ACL tears. The next closest is San Fran with 23, and then the Giants with 19. And so, there's the argument about artificial fields having more ACL injuries. And I guess it's kind of hard to really determine if these injuries, where the injuries occurred, because it doesn't, denote home versus away. But either way, Giants are up there with 19. And then lowest in the league was New Orleans with 6 and Pittsburgh with 7. And so it varies quite widely in that 10-year span. And I think it'd be very interesting to actually do an in-depth study regarding those numbers and see where those injuries happened and what time of the season. Overall, in 2022, there were 31. In 21, there were 44. And it was 36, 37, 52, 48, 44, back to 2016. In 2015, there were 28, 2014, 18, and 2013, 23. So from 2015 to 2016, something happened, because we jumped from having less than 30 a year to over 40 a year, and it's consistently stayed over 30 or 40 every year since then. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, but there's definitely been more ACL tears in the last decade than there were the decade before, at least according to this chart.
Well, and I think you brought up something on a previous show. Guys are bigger, faster, stronger now, right? Their bodies are just like specimens. So when you, like you said, if you're a 6-foot guy that is 240, but you're just built, right? Like compared to a guy 10 years before that, maybe he was a 210 guy, 220, and now these guys are just like science projects, right? I mean, they're just so fit and they're so lean. That's even like, I always joke, you have this huge body, but the kneecap and the whole body kind of comes down to a narrow space where the knee is. So it's a lot of pressure on that part of the body, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the size of their ACLs does not change even if they put more weight on. And so I think that's probably pretty accurate in terms of why it's increased, just because there's more mass and speed coming through these plays in the NFL. And then the last thing, related to that, is another study out of the Orthopedic Journal of Sports Medicine looking at ACL tears in the NFL from 2013 to 2020, but they analyzed the 2020 season specifically because of delays from COVID. And so it changed the preseason schedule and kind of altered the course of the season. And so ultimately, they quoted 379 ACL tears here, and 256 of them happened during gameplay, so 67%, and the other 30% were during practice. But what was interesting is they saw in the 2020 season, there was an increased proportion of in-season ACL tears relative to 2014 through 2019, where there's a higher proportion that happened during preseason games. And so it kind of goes back to how important are preseason games. And really what they found was that the number of ACL tears themselves didn't change. In 2020, they still had kind of right on par the number of tears that were happening in other seasons, but they just happened regular or further in the season or into the regular season because there weren't preseason games. And so those ACL tears, it seems like unless we find another way to prevent it or change it, they're still going to happen. It's just whether it happens in preseason or in a regular season game.
Right.
And so I just thought it was interesting because it goes to show that while for some things preseason games help, for an ACL, it doesn't seem like preseason makes a big difference in reducing the amount of them happening, because it's just that increase in intensity and gearing up, whether it's preseason or regular season, still occurs. And then once you get to the regular season, you know, players are already kind of primed and are back into it. So it happens less during it. But either way, the ACL tears are still happening. And so preseason games are not the answer to preventing ACL tears, at least according to this study, and something else will be. But it's just, I thought it was kind of interesting to look at that. And we have this very unique year in 2020 where things was totally altered, but the amount of ACL tears still remain the same.
David, I'll get you out of here on this one. It's from Larry. He says, would braces on all the players help the entire league? And I'll answer this one. I think, yes, it would make them a lot more handsome with better smiles if everybody got braces. But he corrects himself and says knee braces. So could you imagine if everybody trotted out, everybody trotted out there with knee braces on, you know, just proactively, you know, what would that do?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question because we definitely see a lot of players who do wear them. Unfortunately, in all of our literature and data, there is no brace that protects the knee. And there are a lot of surgeons who don't even brace their patients after they do an ACL reconstruction. Braces can help with certain things and maybe get a little bit more support. And in certain situations, they might provide a little bit of stability, but for ACLs, they do not. It's actually one of the other things I pulled up that I was looking at speaks to this exactly. And if you think about it, these braces that we try to put on a knee, they strap onto the largest muscles in the thigh and the calf in an attempt to limit that ligament moving. But the issue is the bones still move underneath that. You cannot prevent those bones from moving and translating, even if you try and stabilize those muscles. And there's just so much space between a large thigh and the muscle beneath it that, sure, you can maybe give the idea or the appearance of stabilizing a muscle, but
hi, Birdie.
But the bones are still moving, and so there's really she's coming in.
This is the Here We Go Birdie show from now on. This is her podcast. Our jobs are done, guys. We're out tonight. Birdie's taking over.
So to answer that, the final thing I'll say is that to really stabilize bones, a brace would have to be able to actually connect to the bone and anchor bone to bone, and you just can't do that. So braces might look nice, and for certain instances, maybe provide a little bit of like almost like a placebo, but there's no brace that stabilizes the ACL, unfortunately.
I just say Jason brings up a good point. Most of the players don't even wear pads on their legs these days. I think that was interesting. That's another thing. Does that? I mean, that only has to increase the chances of injuring your knee, right? I mean, it just has to. When you don't, I mean,
I don't know. I think, you know, I'll look into that. I'll see if there's any kind of data or info on the kind of change in the wearing of pads and if it's seen an increase in injuries or not. Because ultimately, the padding really just kind of, I guess, in theory, protects the muscle from impact. And so maybe you'll have less bruising or less muscle contusions. But I mean, I don't know. Everyone's doing it. I mean, most guys don't even wear knee pads. If they wear thigh pads, they're as thin as a pancake. So I mean, I don't know even what they do. And so I think that's an interesting question. And I'll do a little homework and get back to you guys with that.
Okay. There you go, Dr. David Ellery. That was a Medical Minute brought to you by our friends over at Lorello Vineyards. David, you did great, but it was all Birdie. She did the heavy lifting tonight. So, all right, David, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Go Browns.
Go Browns.
All right, that was the Medical Minute by Lorello Vineyards. We gotta get into some receivers, Dustin, and this next segment is brought to you by our friends over at Circle K.
Browns fans, get ready for a sizzling sensation that's about to heat up your taste buds. Circle K is bringing you a hot deal this football season. Introducing Circle K's Hot Chicken Wings. And the best part, the price is as hot as the wings themselves. Pick up 6 wings for just $5.99 at your local Circle K today. So what are you waiting for? Gather your friends, your family, and anyone else who craves the ultimate wing experience. Circle K, where every deal is hotter than ever before. Here we go, Brownies. Only at Circle K.
All right, let's get into it. This is our first position group breakdown. We're going to do this for every position group for your Cleveland Browns this past season. What I'd like to do is go individually and go through, we'll kind of go rapid fire. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each guy, but the big contributors, of course, the future of this room, and of course, giving this room an overall grade for this season and what we think they need to do going into this upcoming season. So let's go ahead and get started with Amari Cooper, the star of the show. Amari had a fantastic year, probably the best of his career. He had 72 receptions for 1,250 yards. That was 10th in the National Football League. He had 5 touchdowns on the season, and he was averaging 17.4 yards. One of his best seasons. He was the star of the show. He was Mr. Reliable. He did have a couple issues with drops towards the end of the season, but you could count on him reliably to come down with those acrobat style catches. Your thoughts on Amari, Dustin? I think, he was such a bright spot to this team this year, especially when Nick goes out. With all of the injuries, with all of the kind of the dark clouds hovering over this Browns team, Amari was such a bright spot.
Yeah, and I think back to that Chicago game where Flacco hit him on a dime, and then he just beat the receiver and ran down the sidelines for a touchdown. It's that kind of leadership and that kind of guy you want on the field. And we'll get into this in a further show, but I think the Browns are going to be smart, even at him at 30 years old, to extend his contract and help this contract. I mean, if Andrew Berry anybody can do it. He is so shrewd, and he knows how to manipulate the salary cap like no other and push those into bonuses or whatever down the season. But yes, I think you bring a guy like this back, because a guy like that can only help the young guys that we drafted, right? That can only help the guys in the development of that room. Somewhat like what Jarvis Landry did, right? When Jarvis came in here and said, we're going to stop this losing culture. This is what I demand of this room. Amari Cooper is not that vocal guy, but he can lead by example, kind of like Nick Chubb does. Like, he comes at a high level and says, this is how we're going to play the running back position. And this is how I expect all of you to play, more of a quiet leader. But yes, long story short, should bring him back, extend his contract, and figure out a way to manipulate it to not be such a cap hit.
He is, he's great. I think you definitely want to have him back at the right price. There's not many in the league that can do what Amari can in terms of his route running ability and his reliability. He is awesome. Turning it over to Elijah Moore, who really kind of hit his stride later in the season with Joe Flacco, obviously going back to that chemistry that they had during their times in New York. He had 59 receptions for 640 yards and 2 touchdowns. So obviously that's not the production you want to see necessarily out of your wide receiver 2. And I don't really love listing him as receiver 2 and having that conversation because, how do you define it? But, just not necessarily the production you want to see from him. But Dustin, we were fairly vocal on this podcast that we just did not love how he was being used throughout several parts of this season. Just not being able to bring out the best in him, kind of really exposing him to kind of what he's not good at, more so in some of those orbit motions and just really weird trick plays. Did not love seeing that out of Elijah Moore and using him as more of a rushing attack. Didn't love it. So I think his production kind of reflects that a little bit. Look, I think Elijah's a very good receiver, and when he is being utilized as a receiver, he's good at his job. So obviously, we want to see him back, but I think that it is apparent that there's you need another guy in this room.
Yeah.
It's not going. You can't just rely on Elijah and Amari. But clearly, we're not going to talk about him here, but David Njoku, we're going to throw him in with the tight ends when we get to that, here in a couple of weeks. He was your receiver number 2. You look at his production and his stats, you would say, if you didn't know that he was a tight end, oh, that's receiver number 2. No, he's your tight end. So that's just what the Browns offense was this year. And that's who Elijah Moore was.
And I think, Allie, just to add a little bit to this segment, the wide receivers almost have to have an asterisk next to him this year. And what I mean by that is you had 4 different quarterbacks that had to get timing with all these wide receivers. I don't know about you, but if I had 4 different bosses coming in every few months and be like, hey, actually, we're gonna do it this way. Like, hey, actually, we're gonna do it. Like, that messes up timing, obviously, for these receivers that get used to a guy like, say, Deshaun during training camp and all that, right? And then you're thrusting another guy. So I think it'll be interesting if we get a complete season with Deshaun Watson with these guys, with the ones we bring back. I think we can really look at the body of work then, in my opinion, because these guys, obviously, Amari's a pro, right? He's played in Dallas, he's played here, he's played with, Dak Prescott. So like he's different, right? Like but some of these younger guys, that's a lot to take in if you're a first or second year wide receiver, right? Like that's a lot to take under your belt and say, hey, it's PJ Walker this weekend. Actually, it's DTR, like all those things you have to deal with.
It's Joe Flacco off of his couch. Yeah. So no, that point is valid. I still think that you would have liked to have seen better production out of your receivers, especially when Nick Chubb went down. You had to have it, and unfortunately you didn't. So that's why I do make the comment that you still need another guy. Let's just say all things kind of remain equal with this Browns receiver group into next year. You've got all these same guys back with a healthy Deshaun Watson for the entirety of the season. I would still say that's not going to cut it. You have to have another guy. You have to have a number 2 threat or a number 1A, 1B threat. So let's turn it over.
Kind of like the T. Higgins things that we talked about where Deshaun was out there saying, hey, I could use another 1B. That would be great because I got Amari. I trust him, but I need another guy to take the top off of a defense, right?
Yep. Turning it over to Cedric Tillman, the rookie. Look, there's clearly he's got talent. He's a good receiver. The development was slow. And what I mean by that is not his catching ability. It's not necessarily the routes he runs. Well, it kind of is. It is his pre-snap and being able to read and digest an NFL defense was severely lacking. I mean, go back to every game this season where he started or even really played significant snaps. You will see that there was a lot of pre-snap penalties or, immediately after the snap penalties because of Cedric Tillman. So you have to have that development, just not being able to necessarily read a defense. You saw a clip of Kevin Stefanski getting in his face, which you like to see the emotion out of coach. But nonetheless, there's still a really good receiver within Cedric Tillman. I don't think that you can't really argue that. He's got the talent. It's just we got to get it out of him somehow. I put the blame more so, to be frank, on Chad O'Shea and his, I don't want to say inability to get the most out of receivers, but his inconsistency in doing so over the past couple of years with Cleveland. So I think, especially in the young guys, it goes back to your point, Dustin, if you can get another veteran in here that can do what Amari's done and kind of get the most out of some of these young players, because you got young players, you got some young ones. I mean, David Bell, James Prochet, you've got some young guys, Cedric Tillman, that need this. They need the on-field coaching. And this year was such a weird year because of 15 quarterbacks, no tackles, Nick Chubb's out. It was a very weird year. So being able to learn and develop and grow within the position that you're drafted into, it's really hard. I can't imagine the position he was put into and having to learn and digest it. So, basically, I think he's a good receiver. He will become a good receiver. We just got to see it. We got to see it happen.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, really having consistent quarterback play
Yeah.
will be the key to that as well. Anytime you can have a quarterback out there for an entire season, it just helps. And an entire preseason for one, and then an entire season, it adds to that development. And I think that's why you see things like Deshaun, going out saying, "Hey, if you bring a T. Higgins in, not going to be a big learning curve for me nor him." Right? We
Yeah.
played. We have a familiarity. We saw what Joe Burrow and Chase can do down in Cincinnati. It's kind of magical when those two guys are on the field. At times they're unstoppable. So yeah, I think you need to bring in somebody.
Yeah.
But there'll be a lot of decisions to be made. But yeah, I
Yeah.
would think. But yeah, I think we need to go out and draft one, and we'll obviously dissect the draft show later. But I think you need to maybe look at an offensive position higher in the draft because clearly our defense is really good, and that's not an area of need as it has been in the past as much. So.
Yep. We're going to go quickly through these next couple of guys on the depth chart. David Bell, he had 14 receptions for 167 and 3 touchdowns. He hasn't really, we talk about developed into the player that we thought he would. I mean, we all thought he was going to be Jarvis Landry 2.0, and, that wasn't the case. Marquise Goodwin, he battled some serious health issues with the blood clots and whatnot. So, only 4 receptions for 67 yards on the season. And then James Prochet, who really, didn't do much. They brought him in kind of late. But I guess I just wanted to turn it over to you. And first off, get your letter grade for the receivers as a group. And then, your thoughts on, I know we kind of already talked about it. Obviously, somebody needs to be brought in here. But, would you be happy to see another veteran out there, or do you think it's more appropriate to target in the draft, or both? Just your thoughts on the future of this core.
Yeah, I'll start with the letter grade. So, are we putting David Njoku in this group just because?
No.
Okay.
No.
Then I would, if you took Njoku out, I would go B-. I mean, and the reason I say a B, B- is because I always say like when you're in school and you're grading on a curve, right? Amari Cooper's an A, right? But then after the A, there's a lot of variables underneath him. So I'd give it a B or B- just because Amari was the standout, and we're leaving a Njoku out of this. But I might go B- just because of that.
So I don't actually. I think that the receivers were bad outside of Amari.
Well,
and I mean, you gotta look at the So I'm going C- D+. I think that is a very optimistic grade, given the production of this group. And I think the only reason that I would go C- over a D+ is because of Amari and how much of a shining star he was, how much of a bright spot he was, and what he did for this room.
Right.
But I mean, take him out of the equation. So this would have been tough. This would have been a really tough football team to watch, and not just like, catching of the football, but like creating separation and the pre-snap issues. And I'm not necessarily blaming the guys. Like we said, could be coaching. There could be a lot of things here. It could be quarterbacks. There's a lot of things at play.
Right.
Offensive line issues. But overall, I mean, just calling it for what it is, I just was not optimistic about this receiving core. And clearly something has to give. You have to bring somebody else in. You need depth. You need talent. And we've been saying for years, there's redundancy in this room. Something has to give, especially if we want to be competitive. I mean, look at the teams that made it to, championships. They all have wide receiver depth and star power. They've got speed. They've got big-bodied receivers. They've got it all. They've got depth. So that's kind of the blueprint to win in today's NFL.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I think they need to do both. I think they need to bring in a seasoned veteran and also have to look for the future in the draft. So, in my opinion, you have to address it in both positions. So.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. Real quick, just want to tell you about our friends over at K&D. Whether it's sophisticated suburban living, luxury downtown digs, or senior housing, K&D, the largest property management company in Northeast Ohio, has the perfect home for everyone. K&D is your one-stop shop for housing in the region with apartments and amenities for everyone, including residential, commercial, retail, and also corporate housing. Find your dream home at K&D. Visit knd.com to get started. That's the letter K, the word and, the letter D. angellosmedia.com. While we're at it, why don't you go check out our friends over at Angelo's Pizza? If you're wondering what you should have for dinner, the answer for you is Angelo's Pizza. So be sure to head on over to Lakewood to get your hands on the best pizza in all of Northeast Ohio. It's great in the restaurant, at home, and even just as great the following day. So be sure to head on over to Angelo's today. All right, let's have a little fun. We're going to do some start, bench, cut for some guys around the league. But if you guys like saving money, I know I do, and you are in the market for some new furniture, head on over to the Cleveland Furniture Company. They will get you all hooked up. You need a new bed, you need a new couch, you need a new recliner. They got you covered. They will buy in bulk direct from the factory so they can save you money. So be sure to head on over there and check them out. So this next segment is brought to you from the couch.
From the Couch is brought to you by the Cleveland Furniture Company.
All right.
And Allie, real quick, I'd just like to give a big shout out to Katrina Ellis. We'll be contacting you sometime this week. She's already really super excited this. But out in Lorain County, Katrina Ellis won the recliner, our recliner
Awesome.
giveaway. Katrina Ellis, big friend of the program, watches our show. So thank you for watching, Katrina. Thanks for entering. And by the way, anybody that entered, look for other contests, not only from our friends at Cleveland Furniture Company, but from all of our great sponsors.
Yes, please do. All right, let's do a little here. We'll do some start, bench, cut. You can go around the league. You can do any position group. I'll kick it off. I'll get started. And I kind of want to go with I want to kick it off with defense. So I want to say Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, and TJ Watt. You have to start one, you have to bench one, you have to cut one. What are you going to do?
Okay. Well, that's a tough one.
I'm only going to give you tough ones. I am not going to make this easy.
So Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, and Watt, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go start Myles Garrett because he's such a difference maker.
Sure.
Micah Parsons, you can put on the bench, and I think you got to cut Wyatt. That's where I go.
Okay. All right. I like it. All right. What you got?
All right. Let's go quarterbacks.
Okay.
Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
Brock Purdy.
Okay.
Jared Goff.
Okay.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. So, obviously I'm not, it's like if we had a kind of a blank slate, right? We have to bring this guy in to be the quarterback of our team. I'm going to start Jared Goff.
Okay.
I'm going to bench Brock Purdy because, he is playing in the Super Bowl. I guess that's important. And unfortunately, we'll be cutting our old friend Baker Mayfield.
But that's a tough one, right? Because those all.
That is a tough one. You have to kind of keep them within the same realm. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, okay, what quarterbacks can I throw at Allie that would all kind of.
All right. Well, let me throw a couple quarterbacks at you. I've got a couple for you. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, and Jordan Love.
Ooh, this is good. Okay. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, and Jordan Love.
Yep, that's it.
Trevor, start.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Geno. Who was the other one?
We've got Geno and Jordan Love.
I bench Jordan Love and I cut Geno Smith.
Okay. All right. That's fair. All right. Let's hear it.
All right. Let's go wide receivers here. Let's go Deebo Samuel, Chase, Tyreek Hill.
Ooh, tough. But I'm going to start Tyreek Hill. I'm going to bench Jamar Chase, and I'm going to cut Deebo Samuel. I feel good about that. I feel okay. I feel okay doing that.
That might be the toughest three I might have given you. That's tough.
All right. Well, I'm going to give you coaches. Can I give you some coaches?
Give me some. We'll finish it off on coaches. How's that?
Okay. I'm going to give you some coaches. Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid,
Ooh.
Dan Campbell.
Oh, easy. This is too easy for me. Andy Reid starts. Shanahan bench, Campbell cut.
Okay, that's fair.
And
That's
the only
fair.
reason I say that is body of work, right? Andy Reid, rum and diet. But that's where
You
I'd be
getting
at.
you getting a rum and diet? I heard that. Yeah.
So that's my drink of choice. That's what I drink
Oh, I
on the
know.
golf
I
course and
know.
get a little silly. You know that.
Uh-huh. Hey, I've had a lot of rum lately. I was in the Caribbean
That'll do it.
and then
Well,
I was in Key West shortly
well,
after, so
they
nothing
make
but rum for Ali
they,
Heisong lately.
have you ever had Tortuga rum? That's some of the best
Yeah,
rum.
yeah.
Yeah. I was just
Uh-huh.
saying, we're going to be having some rum with our cruise, so it'll be a
Uh-huh.
lot of rum.
More of that. So Dustin, why don't you tell our listeners about the cruise, just to kind of wrap up here, how they can book if they haven't already and what we've got going on there.
Yeah, go out to brownsfancruise.com. Join us on this great, wonderful cruise. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. Josh Cribbs, Hanford Dixon, Eric Metcalf, a lot of the great Webster Slaughter, just to name a few. Some of those guys that are great alumni of the Browns. It's going to be a fun cruise. You can still book your trip. There's just a couple weeks left, but if you use the code HWGB and put that in the comments, you'll be qualified to win some cool stuff from us on the cruise and be entered to do some really unique one-on-one things, possibly with some of those great legends. But you know what? You know what it is, Allie? It's Super Bowl week, Allie.
It
It's Super Bowl
is.
week.
It is. Let's talk
And,
about it. We got 4
and
minutes.
let's talk about this. This is the Super Bowl that nobody wanted. The San Francisco 49ers versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But
Yep.
I will tell you this. First of all, let's start with should we do our picks? Who you're rooting
So
for?
let's before we do that, let's just talk about our rooting interest here. Are you kind of pulling for one either way? Because I'll tell you, for me, I'm pretty indifferent. I think if I had to root for somebody, I guess it's the 49ers, just because like they haven't done it yet. I would like to see like CMC get a ring. I think that would be cool. I think the Brock Purdy story is pretty cool. I think there's some good storylines, and like I would like to see Shanahan finally do it.
Right.
But like I really don't have a rooting interest. But you're right.
Yeah.
This isn't this really isn't the Super Bowl anybody really wanted. But what do you think?
Okay, so and this is going to sound funny, but I had a unique experience. I went to the NFL draft this year, and it just happened to be in the city of Kansas City, coming off a team that had just won a Super Bowl. So it was a lot of electricity. And by the way, this is nothing against Kansas City Chiefs fans. I think they're some of the nicest fans in the NFL. They literally, when I was there at the playoff game, said, if anybody's mean to you, you tell me, right? They're really passionate, fun fans, I guess. And let's be honest, before Patrick Mahomes was there, they suffered and sucked for a long time, just like the Browns did. So it's not like they don't know what losing looks like, right? They had some lean years as well. Not as lean as ours, but they had some lean years. Here's what I hated. These fans have become a little confident / cocky. And one guy yelled out, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are going to just easily surpass Tom Brady. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Pump the brakes, okay? And so that just annoyed me because I'm like, okay, you're a few years in, and yes, and Patrick Mahomes is clearly on a path to possibly get close to that or break it. But we're way too soon into that timeline to be already saying that. So honestly, Patrick's had enough Super Bowls. Let's give one to San Francisco. So I'm going to be rooting for the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And I got to tell you, I'm a Browns fan, so I ultimately root for underdogs. The Brock Purdy story is the most underdog story you could write. The last guy drafted, the guy that every one of us that does media said he is no good. He shouldn't be the starting quarterback. And what has he done? He's done nothing but prove everybody wrong. Every way he did it, including that game against the Lions. He proved people wrong even in that and came back and won. So I'm going to be rooting for the Niners, and that's where my skin in the game is. I think it'll be a close game because I think these two teams,
I agree.
we talk about this, these two teams match up well. Some teams in the NFL schematically just don't match up well, and it's just going to be a bad football game.
I think this is going to be a good game. I do. Yeah. I think this is going to be a good game.
Yeah, so I'm going to root for the Niners to win it on a late field goal.
Okay. All right. I think I agree with you. I do. I think this is gonna be a really good football game. You've got, you've got a Chiefs team that at the beginning of the season we said, they ain't it. Like they are done. Without Tyreek, it's really rough over there. And then they just kind of do what they do. They start out lethargic and just hit their stride at the right time and just go all the way.
They've been there. They know.
Yeah, and once Patrick gets into the playoffs, it's game over, and that's just how it's been for them.
Yep.
So do I think that they're not going to get smoked in this game? Like I don't think it's in their DNA to do that in the playoffs. They're
Sure.
going to put up a really solid fight, and I think at this point, out of all the teams, obviously remaining, but like all of the teams in the postseason, the Niners would give them the best shot. So I think it's gonna be a fun game. I do, but kind of indifferent. So just hoping for a good game.
No, I think it'll be a good game. Just because of the matchup. I think these guys match up
Mhm.
from a schematic standpoint. They're both well-coached teams, so I think you'll see a really good game. And I don't have to watch the Ravens in the Super Bowl, which makes me drink less and makes me more happy on Super Bowl.
Well, there you have it, guys. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. And I hope you have a good Super Bowl weekend. And of course, with that, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, Browns fans, go Browns.
Go Browns.